I love what we're doing defensively, and I'm super proud of PK and the job he's done, and our entire defensive staff. We've had a lot of continuity over there. Terry Joseph, Blake Gideon, those guys, and we heard a ton about our secondary a year ago and why they weren't what they were supposed to be, or allegedly, and for them to play the way they're playing, and then the addition, I would say, of Kenny Baker, what a great addition he's been to continue to build on the defensive line, and Johnny Nansen, what he's done. Credit to all those guys. When you're trying to play great defensive football, I think it's a mindset as much as it is schematically. And our mindset has grown into, I don't think our guys believe that anyone can move the ball on them, that anyone's going to score on them. And that's a beautiful thing to watch. Like, even at practice, we're in a walkthrough, and the mindset of fitting a run the right way and holding each other accountable. And those are all the little things that I enjoy as a head coach, that we've grown into now as a defensive football team.
That was Texas football head coach Steve Sarkisian talking about his top-ranked defense ahead of Saturday's matchup with Kentucky. And thank you for joining us. I'm Billy Gates. This is, of course, the Horns Report. And with me to talk about UT football and maybe some other UT sports here sprinkled in at the end is KXN Sports Director Roger Wallace. And Roger, let's just get into this. Texas football team, statistically, is the best in the country. They lead FBS teams in total defense. They allow just under 250 yards a game. And they improved that when they allowed 231 against Arkansas in the 20-10 win last weekend in Fayetteville. This defense has evolved almost a full 180 since Sarkisian started. I mean, from covering this team, Roger, what have you seen the biggest, I guess, adjustment they've made defensively?
Well, you think Steve Sarkisian, you think offense. You hear all of his opposing coaches talk about him, play caller, schemes, and he's the first to say, Sark, is that they're winning first and foremost with the defense. So yeah, it's interesting. Pete Kwiatkowski came in from Washington, rough first year. Then they bring in Gary Patterson, big improvement. So then everyone's assuming, okay, it's the Gary Patterson effect there. Well, then he leaves, defense keeps getting a little better, and then this year. I don't think anyone thought it would be this good just because of what they lost. When you think of the two tackles, Byron Murphy, T'Vondre Sweat, Jalen Ford was just an absolute tackling machine. And so I think that's why people maybe are a little surprised, although they're such a veteran group, that guys that stuck around that had decisions to make, primarily Jahdae Barron and Alfred Collins, have made huge effects. And Sark even said it kind of can affect the way they play offense because they know the defense can keep them in. I know fans are kind of frustrated with the offense, but you got to remember sometimes that defense can win you ball games too. If you don't turn it over, give teams short fields, take big chances, you can win 20-10 games.
Yeah, and you mentioned guys like Alfred Collins, Jahdae Barron, who, by virtue of staying in college for another year and developing, might have made themselves a lot of money come the NFL draft next season. Jahdae and Alfred both named to the SEC Players of the Week lists. Alfred Collins, the Defensive Lineman of the Week, and then Jahdae Barron, just the co-overall Defensive Player of the Week. I mean, those two performances those guys turned in, they were pretty special.
The Collins play in the fourth quarter, a 300-plus guy going downfield and tracking the ball carrier and forcing the fumble that essentially iced the game may go down as one of the best and most important plays of the year, depending on how things unfold. And then Jahdae Barron, the great ball skills again with that first pick. And then I think of that third and short on the bubble, and he just blew up the blocker and then a tackle for a loss. So, and then I think it's just their demeanor, Billy. Yeah. They sound like pros. The rah-rah stuff is fine during the 60 minutes, maybe a little bit after, maybe a little bit before. But other than that, they are so businesslike. And I know Sark and the staff love the fact that they've got them to be a voice as well as the coaches. But, this defense has been something else, even against Georgia. The offense gave Georgia some short fields, and still they scored 30, which is, in college football, That's not an
Right.
offensive explosion. So
No, and like you're saying, that is kind of a little deceiving since Georgia had those short fields too.
yeah, and you think about some of
Yeah.
the touchdowns scored against them. I mean, Oklahoma didn't get in the end zone, but they're calling timeouts
Yeah.
to try to get one touchdown in that game. So yeah, it's been incredible. I thought that Arkansas would test them a little bit more than they did,
Sure.
but on the flip side, Texas they kind of made Taylon Green look a little bit slow, which
Yeah.
surprised me. They were not explosive at all.
No, they kept Taylon Green under wraps. He got loose a little bit in the second half, but I mean, overall, I mean, they certainly neutralized his running ability. And like Steve Sarkisian loves to say, he wants his defense to make the opposition one-dimensional. And I think that's what they sort of did with Arkansas there to a certain degree, especially in the fourth quarter after Arkansas started to make their comeback in the third.
Yeah, it's funny because you say they had that good drive. That was it.
Yeah.
So
Yep,
you remember it because that's it, and then you think, wow, all the other times they just didn't do much with the ball. So Kentucky, it'll be interesting this weekend. Kentucky, at least in the numbers, the worst defense in the SEC. Arkansas had the worst pass defense in the SEC. Longhorns did not light it up through the air. So I think you look at game plans and they might not match what you expect to happen because clearly, again, Arkansas kept things in front and Texas didn't have any success going over the top on any kind of regular basis. They took some shots, but we'll see what Kentucky's offense has struggled. They've
Right.
turned the ball over,
Yeah.
and so we'll see. As long as Texas comes out ready to roll, it's almost like there's no reason to think they'll play a solid game. They're going to get gashed. Everybody gets gashed, but it's that can a team sustain it
Right.
over the course of a game?
Right, and the games that Kentucky's been close with, obviously they're close with Georgia, 13-12. They almost beat the Bulldogs. They beat Ole Miss. I believe the score was like 20-17, something like that. And then they played Tennessee tough. They did that with their defense. Like it wasn't like their offense was really any good at all.
Yeah.
They did that with their defense, and so like it's kind of an interesting thing where like statistically their defensive numbers in SEC play aren't that good. But you look at the top teams they've played all those teams really tough.
Yeah, and obviously the big ones, they actually beat Ole Miss. The other ones,
Yeah, right.
they played close. And
Yeah.
the Kentucky game for Georgia actually cost them the top spot, even though
Right.
they won. That's when Texas moved to the number one ranking.
Yeah.
But now it doesn't matter. They've lost a couple of games. But yeah, they played teams tough. Vanderbilt, to me, impressed me when they won against Alabama, and then they went to Lexington. Again, it was a pretty low-scoring game, I think 20-13, but still they won in Lexington against a Kentucky team after a week of celebration and being the toast of the country. But again, I mean, the last thing Sark wants to do, and we heard it in his voice today,
Right.
and I'm sure the players right now are echoing it, is think that they've accomplished anything more than staying in the conversation.
Right. And that is where I was headed next. I mean, it's easy for us in the media to look ahead a week, after we've had our turkey dinners and everything, to look ahead to November 30th and see the Lone Star Showdown, which, if things go right, if A&M beats Auburn, if Texas beats Kentucky, that game is going to be a deciding factor in who plays for the SEC championship. Obviously, the rivalry is what it is. There's no really love lost there. If it happens, if both those teams win, and there's a showdown in Kyle Field where the winner goes to the SEC title game and the loser gets a week off, that is prime college foot. That's college football at its finest.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing if
Yeah.
you look at the standings right now, and the two teams alone at the top of the SEC are Texas and Texas A&M. I think I think you could almost say it might be a 13-team playoff starting that night with an elimination game because, again, the one thing for Texas is the way this schedule has kind of unfolded, they don't have those great wins in conference play, so they're going to get hurt in a tiebreaker. And they're going to get hurt, I think, in the committee's eyes. And I'd be fascinated to see if they beat Kentucky, where they sit next week. It's going to be 3 or 2, right? If Ohio State loses to Indiana, then it's going to be 2. Oregon has a bye week. But then what happens if they lose to A&M? Would they drop so far that it's not realistic to think that they could get in on a 10-2 regular season, knowing that other factors come into play. So if they win this weekend, I think there's some people that think 10-2 is good enough because they're going to be high. But we've seen the 14 playoff rankings. All of a sudden, that last ranking looks nothing like what you've been watching over the past month and a half. So
Florida State knows all about that.
Yeah, no, TCU and Baylor have been down that road, and some other teams that have been sitting there at 4, 5, 3, and all of a sudden that final one comes out and they're 7. So, got to take care of Kentucky, obviously.
Right.
And then you wonder if they can go to College Station, maybe with a playoff berth in their back pocket. If they go to Atlanta, especially if they go to Atlanta at 11-1, they're in the 12-team playoff, and they're going to host a playoff game if they don't win the SEC championship. But man, this is what everybody wanted, and they are getting it because people are going crazy trying to figure out all the scenarios. You and I were talking. It's crazy to think Georgia's done in the SEC. Everybody else has got some have 2 games.
Yeah.
They play UMass and they play their traditional rival game against Georgia Tech. So they're sitting at 6-2, going, all right, let's see if we can sit here and the chips fall and we end up in Atlanta.
Yeah, and that could be both good and bad from Georgia's standpoint because you're just. I mean, obviously you have 2 games to play, but I mean UMass is a basketball school, and Georgia Tech is what they are. So
UMass just fired their football coach today.
Yeah, so like if you're Georgia, like you sitting around trying to see how things unfold could be a little unnerving, but it could also you have its advantages. So.
Kirby Smart wouldn't have taken 6-2 in the SEC heading into this weekend, but it might be good enough
maybe
to get to Atlanta.
Yeah, we'll see. That's the beauty of college football. They play these games on the field, not on paper. So 2:30 p.m. on Saturday, Texas plays Kentucky. And obviously, what we've been saying, they got to win to avoid the tiebreaker scenario. I believe Cedric Golden of the Austin American Statesman called them hieroglyphics today during the press conference when he was asking Steve about it.
Being honest, I don't like Texas's chance in a tiebreaker.
No, absolutely
not. It just doesn't seem like a path. And by the way, that A&M game has been set.
Yes,
6:30 in College Station on that Saturday night.
There's the upcoming schedule right there. Again, Kentucky, 2:30 p.m. on ABC. November 30th, Texas A&M at Kyle Field, 6:30 p.m. That is a primetime game. That's going to be the game, the game of the day, the one everybody's going to watch. And then the SEC title game will be December 7th at 3 p.m. also on ABC. So that's obviously a if Texas gets there kind of thing. Well, they'll still play the game. It's just a matter of if Texas is there or not. But yeah, we're in the home stretch, Roger. Like this is it seems like we were just talking about training camp yesterday, and now we're 2 games away from the end of the regular season, and then embarking on this brand new 12-team playoff journey. Crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, and you think about where fans were with that loss to Georgia, and that game. There was so much build up to that game, and it almost feels like Texas kind of got caught up in that. And we've talked about the whole atmosphere around it, and they just didn't seem like they ever were really in sync. Since then, it's been more of a kind of taking care of business thing.
Sure.
Florida game was different. They were playing their backup. We saw third string. We saw what DJ Lagway can do. But still, they lit up that defense too.
They did.
And LSU did not. So, here we go. And to think of the swings that could happen in 2 games from potentially being the number 1 or the number 2 seed in the entire field, because, again, Oregon, Ohio State likely are going to play for the Big Ten. If Ohio State loses one and then beats Oregon, or Indiana, obviously is a contender.
Sure.
But anyway, all the things that can happen from the incredible disappointment of missing out on the 12-team playoff for Texas, all those things are in play.
Mm-hmm. And I still can't get over Oregon and Big Ten in the same sentence, but that's a different conversation.
Well, the fact that I had to catch myself reminding myself that Indiana is, in fact, undefeated going into this weekend in Columbus.
Your Hoosiers. Awful play that was. All right, well, we're going to end it there. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Horns Report. For Roger Wallace, I'm Billy Gates, and we'll talk to you again very soon.